Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Committee of the Whole regular meeting. I'd like to welcome everybody here that's online, as well as to our councillors and staff that are here in the room. And welcome to Doug Collins, our media person in the back. So we'll start off, call the meeting to order at 1 p.m. First item 1A on the agenda is added items. Is there any added items that anybody would like to put forward? Seeing none, then I'll look for a motion for adoption of the agenda. Councillor Wilson.
I think I make the motion that the Committee of the Whole meeting regular agenda for Tuesday, July 2nd, 2024 at 1 p.m. be adopted as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any comments? None? Call for the vote. All in favor? Passed. Thank you very much. Takes us down to item number 2, adoption of the previous minutes of the Committee of the Whole. Through consensus, do we have consensus of the minutes? Any changes? Comments? No? I take that as consensus then, so we'll move on to 3, presentation delegations, Community Services Strategic Plan 2024-28, and I'll pass it off to CAO Williams. Too many W's.
I knew you wouldn't forget me. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. So today we have Director O'Brien with us to provide Council a summary presentation on Community Services Strategic Plan. As Council is well aware, part of the Council Strategic Plan is for our respective divisions, of which there are 5, to develop business plans, essentially. What Director O'Brien did when she first arrived about fall, winter of last year, was undertake a engagement exercise within the Community Services Division, of which there's Parks and Recreation, there's Communications and Engagement, and to the Community Development. And out of that engagement exercise is this document. So even though it's administratively focused, it is built by the staff of Community Services, and how Council will see that translate into a business plan, an actionable business plan that does meet Council strategic goals, will come forward when we do have at least other divisions in a comparable form, because we do want to deliver something to Council that is structured or similarly structured across all 5 divisions. But for now, I'm happy to let Lori introduce the strategic plan, and many months of hard work with her and her staff went into it, and I won't preempt or steal her thunder. So, Director O'Brien, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to start by thanking CAO Brent Williams for providing me with the opportunity to do this important piece of work. As the new Director of Community Services, it really gave me an opportunity to listen to staff, hear what their issues were, what their thoughts were, and then engage them in conversation about where to go. So it is an important document. It gives us a path going forward. We know that within the next 5 years there will be changes to that path that we will have to be flexible to and respond to. But this has really given us an opportunity to look at who we are for the community and what's important in the work we do, and align with the overarching vision that Council has provided the division to meet your values and your strategic direction also. So really important to that is aligning with your vision. You do set that overarching long-term vision, usually 10 years or more, and our vision is alive with opportunity. So Community Services has had to ask each of its departments, who are we for the community with this vision top of mind in terms of being alive with opportunity? And also, how can we align with Council's strategic goals? So as CAO Williams said, that each division will be responsible for developing its own framework, which is in alignment with Council's overarching vision and values. And this really And this really helps us add value that division does. So some, well, why strategic plans can sit and collect dust, or they can be living documents. I'm hoping that this one is a living document. As I mentioned, it's really important that we align with the overarching direction that you give us, which we've really attempted to consciously do here. It helps the division itself, all the staff, understand what community services is, what the long-term vision for community services is, and why we exist, what our purpose is, what our mission is. We have outlined 5 goals, so within those goals is providing staff with a on a day-to-day basis about their work and where it is they're going. And each goal has strategies that span over 5 years, and those have allocations within the present budget we have in terms of how we define go on any day. It will discuss in basis with you, performance measures for the things that they're doing, and provide transparency is working. Also allow us to be adaptive to the changing environment that's going to happen over the next things that are more important account the work that we do. Is the partnership engagement that community services do. We interact on a continual basis with many partners. Once our partners know what we do, there are increased for us to work together. So really looking forward to decision making. We know we have a finite list of resources, and it allows us to have better about those resources on any given day, and also receive direction from council long term about how those are allocated. We're always looking for things that we can do that are affordable. Environment. How we do our work is fairly important too. Not least is innovation and continuous improvement planning. It allows us to continually ask what we're doing for today and where should we be going in the future, and how do we get there. So the idea of innovation within the work that we do. So the strategic planning process, as CAO Williams mentioned, involved a lot of engagement with staff. So we did over 15 hours of engagement with the departments within community services, and really involved them from the front line right up to management in asking some very curious questions about the work that we do. And that led us to developing these 5 goal areas. We did that through a process that you might be hearing more about in the future. It's called Challenge the Process. So speak the truth to people in power. Tell us what's working well, and making a list of those, and really feeling good about that. If we're doing things well, we can kind of use that as a area to pivot from and become more innovative and efficient for the work we do. We let staff tell us what's not working well. You know, what things are we doing, but we're just not quite there, either because of resources or time or other factors. And then last but not least is what really needs improvement. What should we be doing, but for a variety of reasons it's completely falling off the table and into the cracks. So really getting a list of those and then theming those with staff and really having some rich discussions with them was really, really important for me as a new director. And then through those discussions, we also did some work to inspire a shared vision with the staff in terms of what community services is about. Had them vote on various vision statements, wordsmithed a couple of things and put them forward. So even working from the front line to management was a huge piece of work for team building and trust building within the division. And then the identification of the 5 goal areas is really enabling others to act. It's one thing as a senior leader to be dictating what should happen, and it's another thing to enabling other people to provide service to the community on a day-to-day basis within a goal framework. And we're hoping that this is what this does. The strategic planning process, we talked about the sustainability and accountability of it. In the document are some priorities and 5-year strategies. We are in the process of developing tracking and reporting to you on those, and also having conversations about, okay, so when we accomplish a goal, we've really done a great work, how do we celebrate and how do we recognize accomplishment with the staff, with the budget and the resources that we have. That's just a few pictures of some of the engagements we did with staff across the division. So it was very collaborative, very open, a lot of brainstorming, a lot of theming. Yeah, it was a good process. It wasn't all roses. Staff told us, a lot of things that weren't working, right? And thematically, we had to list it in terms of what are the challenges that we currently face within the division. Clearly, staff felt there was inefficiency, there's a lack of standards and service levels. We've started to address those service levels, as you've seen, and starting to address the kinds of standards that people need to have in place in order to know what to do, how to do it, and what a good job looks like. People also expressed a lack of focus. There was a lot of people being busy at a lot of things, but a lack of focus, and hopefully that's what those 5 goal areas are going to be doing for us. And a disconnection between departments, a lack of teamwork and trust among departments. So those are the kinds of things that we're working on. There was also a disconnect with community needs, basically because with the resources we have, there wasn't a lot of thought being put into evaluation, nor gathering input for direction from community. We largely rely on council for being most closely associated with the community and representing council and giving us direction, but also just in terms of the programming piece that much of my division does, there needs to be more evaluation and assessment and taking in what people think they want, what it is they're satisfied, what is missing. And because we really didn't have a long-term vision or strategies, very difficult to connect with partners long-term in the community. So on a long-term basis, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. We do a lot of work now, but to increase that work and to have more longer-term discussions with our partners in the community. The trust, support, and teamwork I mentioned. Staff resources and scheduling, there's opportunities there to do a better job of utilizing the staff resources we have and to efficiently schedule staff. To make sure we're getting the best bang for our buck. And then the whole budgeting process, historically it's been pretty top-down. There has been a bit of disconnect from staff at the front line understanding the budget process, even our mid-management level understanding the budget process. So I think there's opportunities there to have more collaboration and input and empowerment in the budgeting process. And then the concept of leadership development. We have several staff who are really committed to living here and working and playing in Olds. And they've really expressed a desire to be invested in. So what are the opportunities for investing in them as future leaders within the organization? And then the rewards and recognition. How do we reward staff for a job well done? It's not just that you show up and you put your time in, but when you hit some targets, how is it we're going to actually recognize that? And then the concept of a business approach balanced with community needs. We talked a little bit about that through our conversations in levels of service, but how do we afford the services that we provide long-term? How do we do that in an affordable way for people? And how do we sustain the facilities, the buildings, and the services in the long term? So it's going to take a bit of a mindset shift and some education of our staff to get thinking in that way. Okay. In our conversations, several issues were identified as current needs within the community. And some of these are not specific to Olds, some of these are national trends. So the whole idea of active living or sedentary living and obesity, we know it's a national, if not worldwide issue. And certainly our department being community services and focused on many of our services are active living, we have a role to play there. More and more we're seeing people on their devices, on computers, on their iPads, on their telephones, and they've forgotten how to play. They've forgotten what it's like to be outside and to be connected to nature. We have beautiful parks here in Olds, so moving some of our programming towards the outdoor environment and reconnecting people with nature so that they have more contact in nature is certainly a need in the community. The other need that is identified is inequities that limit participation. They could be physical limitations that people experience. We have many people who have physical needs in the community, and that whole idea of access to services and just getting around town and to services, whether it be transportation, whether it be affordability. Some of the inequities may be cultural. We're seeing a changing face of people that are residing in Olds, and we need to really find out what their needs are. You know, it may not be playing hockey. It may be cricket pitches. It may be something else. But we need to start doing more and more work with the new people who are becoming residents of Olds. And then some of it might be educational or social. People may not have the skills in terms of positive participation or the social skills. And that's sort of linked to the, reliance on our iPads and phones. But we have a role to play there in terms of connecting the community to one another and as individuals. And then the whole idea of meaningful community engagement and communication with our diverse audiences. We're very lucky that we have a communications and engagement department within the division, and the role that they play in terms of making our promotions readable. Possibly we may need to move to maybe even second languages in the future in some of the information that we're doing. But are we connecting in a meaningful way with people, especially the diverse communities within Olds? And then that whole idea of partnership expansion, there's a real opportunity here to allow community services to be a meaningful partner to private businesses, to nonprofit organizations, to schools, to have a richer, a more meaningful partnership developed. There's opportunities there to doing that, to provide more programming at less cost for the community. And then looking at the whole diversity of program offerings that we offer, are we offering the right things, and can we afford them within our present budget and future budgets moving forward? So those are some of the current needs that were identified. So through all of our discussions, we have articulated a vision. So we envision a community in which people are engaged in meaningful, accessible recreation, parks, community building services, events, and communications that foster individual and community well-being, sustainable natural and built environments, capacity building, engagement, and partnerships. And then following the vision, we define some operating principles. So we are going to move towards, and some of this isn't going to happen tomorrow, it's a movement towards and a focus of defined service levels, being outcome driven. If we invest this kind of money, what are some of the outcomes that we're hoping to have for the community, and how are those evaluated? What does having a quality program for the community mean, and what's the community's role in assessing that quality? And then basing some of the things we do on evidence-based, things like the connection to nature. There's science that's associated with that, and how can that influence the programming that we do? There's lots of research that dictates the kinds of approaches that we have. Are we using those? Are we using best practices? So moving towards that kind of an approach. And then partnerships and collaboration shows up there again, increasing the amount of partnerships we have and the amount of collaboration that we have with partners, and really defining what our roles in a partnership are. And then that whole innovation piece, allowing for that innovation to come through from the community, from our partners, from our staff. So the goals and priorities and the 5-year strategies. So there are 5 goals. Active living is one, and there's a definition for the active living there. It means fostering active living through physical activity. The second goal area is inclusion and access, and that means increase inclusion and access to community services for the people of Olds who face constraints to participation. And then the third goal is connecting people and nature. We help people to connect to nature and spend time outside. And the last goal, supportive environments, supportive, transparent, and open communications together with physical and social environments that encourage participation in engagement activities, recreation, parks, arts, culture activities to help build Olds as a strong, caring community. So the work forward is to keep the strategic plan alive, to give it inspiration. We're forming a team of people who are going to keep it alive within the division so that when we get turnover of staff and we get seasonal staff hiring, that everyone becomes aware of the 5 goal areas and our vision, and that's happening. As I mentioned, we're working on tracking and reporting. We are also working on how do we give recognition and appreciation in a very heartfelt way for those who go above and beyond, who meet the targets. And then the 4th area that we're working on is that 5-year planning. We will be revisiting it throughout the year, making adjustments, reporting to council on progress or lack of progress or change in priorities based upon direction that council gives us. Okay, and I think that's it. You have the strategic document before you, and I would just open it up for any questions or comments.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Director O'Brien. Very informative. And I'd just like to let everybody know on council that there is a hard copy that has been put into your mailbox for your review. And I will open up the floor for comments and questions to Director O'Brien. Mayor Dahl.
Thank you, Director O'Brien. I have 2 observations just from your report as well, just the 2 report on, as far as the diverse and community services Canada Day, for example. I spent a lot of time at the ballpark on the weekend with the baseball, and there was a lot of people complimenting the parks in town. One lady said to me that she does a lot of ball games with her grandchildren. She says, but Olds is the best place to come and play. There was that aspect as well as your staff. I commend on behalf of my council, and I'm sure they would agree, that the amount of gratitude we got at Canada Day this year was overwhelming. Everybody just absolutely loved being where they were. So thank you and kudos to your staff.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Anyone, any further questions? Councillor Ryan?
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Daley. I just wanted to comment with regards to the plan, and that is that I read through it it's quite extensive. And I think that there's a lot of lofty goals in there, but I think you've got yourself in a position where you are on a certain track, and I think that that's what was needed in the department. So congratulations on putting this together. And I also wanted to echo Mayor Dahl's comment about Canada Day. It certainly was a terrific event, very well attended. Everybody seemed to be very happy and celebratory about the event. And I just wanted to thank you and your staff and all of the staff that participated in Canada Day to make it such a remarkable event in Town of Olds. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, as well as the thank you to the volunteers, all the community members that stepped up and volunteered. It was a great day in Olds. It was a really fun time. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. Not so much, excuse me, a question, but again, just a comment and observation. I really like the document and the investment and the time, and I'm, to a certain extent, all about the process. And I like the path that your group is going down. Look forward to the similar reports from from other departments, and just the engagement and relying on the people, the boots on the ground, to tell us what's working, what isn't working, and what needs to be improved. Those are the folks on the coalface, so to speak, that know best how we should be doing business in a lot of cases. So, and I guess in a roundabout, my question is, so does this document kind of blaze a trail for your group, or were there remnants of this existing in some form or another, or is this kind of a new approach? Because I really like it. It touches on a lot of the fundamentals when you talk about benchmarking and reporting and all those things that for a red person like me are near and dear. So
Yeah, I think it aligns nicely with the direction that council's given administration and the direction certainly that Brent has given, that he sees as needed. Is it new? I believe it is. I think staff were really wanting this. They're really wanting the conversation and the collaboration. We have a terrific group of staff. They just need to funnel their energies in an area and really receive the kudos for the good work that they're doing. So I certainly will pass on your thanks to the staff, because it's a huge amount of work in terms of the things like Canada Day. And they do really pull together really well. It doesn't happen easily, but yeah, they made it look seamless and easy, and I think the community really appreciates it, and the community building that goes through events like that is huge. So yeah, it is new. It provides us with a focus and a vision and a plan over 5 years. Will that plan change? Yes, just like any plan, but it gives us a plan.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Walsh?
Yeah, no, this is a well-written strategy. So my question is, the next step in this is to produce a business plan around each of these goals going forward? Is that my understanding of this?
Go ahead.
Right. So with Director O'Brien, so she started this strategic plan as a visioning exercise, as what was how she led the process. I don't expect each division to follow the exact same process or produce the exact same document. What I hope to give to council is certainly a more streamlined document, but really outlining the departmental goals, which are already in here, explaining tersely how they relate to council's goals and the broader goals of the organization, and then how we can action those, and that involves budget implications and timelines as well. So it's still a bit fluid right now, but certainly we want every division to create something of its own. And I believe even though every one of the 5 will look different, I hope the process is similar in that the staff have the hand in creating it. And from there, we also want council to give feedback before we present something final on if that particular business plan or groups of corporate planning matches what council believes will help its strategic plan and our corporate goals.
Any other questions or comments? I'd like to thank Director O'Brien for your presentation, and I really appreciate your leadership from you and your staff in putting this document together. I found it to be very good quality, a very, very informative and an easy read. So I really appreciate that, the work that you've put into this. Thank you. Okay, let's move down to section 4, new business. Oh, we don't make motions, do we? Okay, we'll call for a motion for information.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. I just want to move that that the committee accept the community services strategic plan for 2024 2028 report for information as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Call for the vote. All in favor? Opposed, if any? None. Passed. Thank you. Takes us to section 4, new business, notice of motion. I'll turn it over to CAO Williams for our introduction.
Thank you again, Deputy Mayor. So this is before council for a second time, the notice of motion that Councillor Wilson put forward in the spring. And today is what we're asking council to decide if it's going to go forward to a regular council meeting for final consideration, or will you not bring it forward, essentially. So the paper's there. It's relatively self-explanatory. Even though administration doesn't provide recommendations at committee meetings, I think if council wanted to switch, we're able and capable, and I think there's benefit to switching to a salary model from administration's point of view. But of course, this is 100% council's realm, so I wouldn't preempt that at all. The only thing I will add to this before stopping to talk is that because it's not mentioned here, but the idea that the remuneration committee put forward was that a councillor's job in the town of Olds is to remain part-time, including the mayor's. And when we get into the idea and the real reality that councillors' time are getting more and more spent on business of the town, that it's taking up much more than a part-time job ought to take up, it may not be a bad idea to push against that notion too, that be very difficult recruiting people to run for council of a diverse makeup of town citizens if it's perceived or in fact being viewed as more of a full-time commitment for a part-time pay. So if council starts to take steps to protect its own time, that work-life balance, so to speak, it could also pay dividends in encouraging more people who have perhaps less time than some of you may have, for instance, to devote to council work, to run for council. So it's something I didn't add in here, but I do believe so much is being taken of or expected of council that, in my opinion, council almost is a volunteer position. Very few, if any, people sign up for the monetary rewards. And I believe it's a worthwhile goal to keep in mind, that the more people we can have interested in running for council, the more engaged our citizenry is. And if that means reducing council's workload as well, I think the salary model would accomplish that a bit better than the current per diem model. But with that, the document's there. If it's missing any information, we'll try to buttress it as best we can, but I believe it's self-explanatory.
Thank you, CAO Williams. I open the floor for any comments, discussion. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Daley. I have multiple concerns with this, and I wrote down at least 5, but I'll start with 1, and then I'll let the floor open to other councillors to comment. What I have a concern about is the commission compensation part, and the fact that trying to meld in that what we get from commissions into a salary calculation will not work. And here's the reason why. When you take a look at this hypothetical salary model and you look at the commission compensation, and we have down 1775, I don't know where you got the number from. When I was on Mountain View Seniors Housing just previously, I'm currently on it right now, but I was chair, and as chair, that was a $6,000 hit. So 1775 is not anywhere near that. And also it says it here, and they're using an example of Mountain View Seniors Housing as meeting monthly. It does not meet monthly. When I started on that board 6 years ago, it did meet monthly, and sometimes even more than that when because there's a lot of issues. Now it's more like 8, and I think it'll reduce down to 6 because we've gotten, a lot of the financial problems sorted out, and it's working very well. So to me, calculating that in is very difficult. And how would you put in and allow for an opportunity for a counselor who's on a commission to sit as chair? I know that Counselor Cummings is chair of the Waste Commission right now. And when I was chair of Mountain View Seniors Housing, I was also signing checks every 2 weeks. You can't calculate that in and expect it to be shared amongst all counselors when you can't even we don't even know what the figures are of how much commissions are paying. So that's my number one concern about trying to put commission compensation in with the salary calculation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Any further comment? Councillor Walsh?
Yeah, my comments were along the same lines as Councillor Ryan going through this. The goal seems to simplify, but when you start committee weighting system, it becomes more complex. And for even when I was on Cape, yeah, I became chair. It was a lot more than 0.2, so you got to start making allowances for that type of processes where you move into committees or chairs position. It takes more time. In the case of Cape, they don't pay you. It's a town cost. And on the other side with commissions, you know, it's not the town that's paying each individual councillor for commissions. It's split between 3, 4, 5 different communities, so it really doesn't represent what the community, our community is paying that councillor, so that skews it a little bit. But yeah, I'm just saying it's got to be a little bit more complex. On Parkland Regional Library System, it meets 5 times a year, but I join one of their committees that meets monthly. So where do you allow for those changes during an organizational meeting when you don't know what the future is going to be, whether it's in the next 6 months, next 8, 12? It's just becomes complex, and there's got to be a lot of discussion how that works. So, you know, commissions, committees, and just events. Events pop up during the year. Again, you're in a per diem situation if you're not planning for it. So those are some of the comments that I have.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Any further comments? Councillor Wilson?
I guess I'll be brief because I've previously stated my thoughts on this. I fully support the salary model as a move towards simplifying the administration, for one. I appreciate and understand the comments by Councillor Ryan and Councillor Walsh. But again, as the CAO alluded to, I think bringing some certainty to compensation for councillors certainly would potentially go a long way to attracting candidates for the role. And to me, that's a big part of what a salary program would do, is give some certainty to individuals around compensation. I think the CEO also alluded to there's an element of public service. I don't know what you call it, whether it's philanthropic, whether it's benevolence. But I think we all sit around this table knowing we don't run for municipal positions to get rich. You do it to try and make an impact. You do it to have a say around the table. You do it perhaps for personal development and growth. And so it's not always measured in terms of dollars and compensation. I realize and understand that that's certainly a factor into this. But to me, there are other reasons why you would become involved in a commission. I would certainly, and anything we do here, if we go down this path, would certainly require a review of the policy. I don't know what it is, 106C or whatever, council compensation, to really start to set some expectations around, as Councillor Walsh mentioned, events and attendance. Because to me, part of it is about accountability. And we all have a role to play as far as visibility goes in the community, as far as an obligation to being involved, whether that and how that translates into compensation dollars. I'm not as fussed about that, because again, to me, you do it to try and make a positive impact. But we would clearly need a review, a thorough review, again, if you go down this path, around expectations and setting expectations for counselors, not only for most counselors around this table right now, but, you know, in 15 months' time or whatever, we have another municipal election coming. And so for people to make an educated decision around whether they want to run and what that's going to look like from a time commitment, we need to be very clear around what those expectations are from a time perspective. So, and that's demonstrated through leadership from this table here, as well as the chief elected official, and bringing some accountability. But to me, it's all about streamlining. We talk about governance, we talk about fiscal responsibility. To me, that starts to touch on some of these issues with the salary program. And I would certainly support bringing it to a council meeting and let the chips fall where they may for a final time. And if this motion is defeated, then so be it. We'll put a toe tag on this thing and pull the sheet over the body and move on, so.
Yeah, go ahead, CEO.
Thanks. It's poetic, if nothing else. Yeah, just a couple of the procedural things Councillor Ryan and Councillor Walsh touched on. First, with the weighting, yeah, that was just thrown together as an example. Of course, it has to be looked at more carefully for a committee model. Just something I used in my past that worked out well. The second thing, commission compensation, again, it's put there just for information. It's just a average of what we expect it, and that will be reviewed annually as well. But anything else would just come to the town and be into council's budget as potentially surplus revenue, for instance. Yeah, but I think instead of debating the details, it's more of really the philosophical piece than the what if it's 775 is not correct, for example. So.
Thank you for the clarification. Councillor Ryan?
I had my hand up before. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Daly. Just to speak to about the certainty of the compensation, I think there is that certainty already built in. When you take a look at it, we already have a set honorarium. We get a certain amount of money as our honorarium, and then you get per diems pertaining to the committees you work on. All of this and any other money that we are compensated with through the town is all on the website. Every year it's posted, our salaries are posted, and people can take a look. If you want to run for council, it's already posted there. When I ran for council, I took a look, you know, just to get an understanding of what kind of financial receipts we would be receiving. So I think it is very clear. I don't think that there is an uncertainty just with the current model that we have. Just to speak to Councillor Walsh's comment too, with regards to events that come up. There are events that come up during the year. We know that. There are sometimes a conference. I know that Councillor Cummings just attended Alberta Chamber Conference, right, Councillor Cummings, and I don't think that was part of his budget, and that could go through your unallocated. Now, where is that within the salary range when those things come up that are outside of the norm and you need to attend, or you think it's a value to the council to attend? And I don't see how that is going to be covered in a salary. And then at the end of the day, I think not every counselor is able to be at everything. And that's, so you might actually stop or prevent people from running for council because they have a full-time job. And they feel that they need to attend everything, then they know that they can't because they have a full-time job and they wouldn't be able to. So how does that cover salary as well? So there's a lot of things that, to me, that are still a question mark. I cannot support this at all. Perhaps if you move the commission compensation out of this scenario, perhaps that might be a little bit better, but at the end of the day, we can't all be at everything, and all around the table, we have different commitments, we have businesses that we have to attend to, we have family life that we have to attend to, and this prevents us from being everywhere at all the time. And yeah, I just have a difficulty with saying the salary that I would get should be accurate in comparison to, say, Councillor Walsh, who may not be able to attend as many things as I can attend simply because of time commitment with the co-op, say. So that's my concern about going salary.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Mayor Dahl?
Thank you very much. I concur with CAO Williams that this needs to be once again brought back, especially when we have a full council around the plate. Right now, we're missing Councillor Blatz's comments. Not only that, I do concur with Councillor Wilson, and I do support this notice of motion for a salary model for council. The benefits as are on this briefing note are way outweighing the drawbacks. The drawbacks to me, and I've been mayor for a long time, are not an issue. That's my personal point. And going to Councillor Cummings' comment, he does have, or not your comment, the comment made with regards to Councillor Cummings having attended an event that he didn't have allocation for. Of course he had allocation for it. There's allocation, did you ask him?
I saw it on his budget.
Well, then I would say that I think if he didn't have allocation, he probably wouldn't have attended, but he does have unallocated funds that he could use for that. But this isn't about Councillor Cummings, what he goes through or what he doesn't. I know my council know what their role is. I don't think anybody would abuse it, and this is just my opinion speaking. Everybody else seems to be able to state their comments around the table, and self-policing is already being done. I don't think there's an issue with that. That's just my thoughts for today.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And again, hopefully my comments will be brief. One is, and again, I do appreciate the discussion around the table. My thought is there is ambiguity, and a salary program will not remove 100% of the ambiguity, but the way we have it now, there is ambiguity, which is why I said if whatever we do, whether we adopt a salary program or not, and I believe policy 106C, council compensation, is coming before council at some point, that certainly needs to be reviewed and crisped up and clarified in terms of some of that compensation between the honorarium or whatever base salary we're going to have, base compensation we're going to have, and a per diem based on event attendance. I agree with Councillor Ryan. It's impossible to expect all council to have the same availability for events. So there is some latitude there while maintaining clarity around the expectations. I think ultimately, at the end of the day, a council person's effectiveness is not only driven by their attendance at events. There certainly is an obligation in my mind to attend relative to that public service component. Visibility is certainly a piece of it. But as we all know, there's way more to the effectiveness of a council person than events that they're attending. And leave it up to the electorate on a 4-year cycle to determine and decide whether an individual, if they choose to run again, gets reelected across a variety in the spectrum of criteria, not just events and attendance and everything, which we know the role is much more than that. And again, just there is ambiguity, at least for me, and maybe I need to educate myself more, but I look at it the way we structured it now. Events, are they less than, an occurrence, is it less than 2 hours? Is it an hour and 50 minutes, then I'm charging this rate? If it's 2 hours and 5 minutes, then I'm progressed to another rate. Is it a partner event? Is it an event, or is it on a per hourly basis? There's all sorts of subjectiveness, or elements of subjectiveness under our current system that I think a salary program may not remove entirely, but would certainly remove a lot of it, and get away from that ambiguity and that trying to decide, again, an event, a partner event, I'm wearing my name tag so I can bill on an hourly basis as opposed to a $100 flat fee for an event. And the only other thing I would point out, and I would remind the many thousands of people that view our YouTube council meetings, council remuneration and expenses are all on the town website, and I encourage people to look at it occasionally. And so in 2023, if I look at honorariums and per diems claimed, the range was between 37 and 39,000 for all of council, excluding the mayor, because the mayor is rightly so at a different pay scale. So 37 to 39,000. If I read this recommendation here for 2025, I believe what's being proposed is a salary component of about 40,000. Setting aside the issue of the commissions, which agree perhaps needs some fine tuning and tweaking, quite frankly, I'm not going to get fussed, given that in 2023, all of us claimed between 37 and 39,000, excluding commissions, if we determine a salary to be $40,000. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Cummings?
Thanks, Chair. So I guess there's some confusion about my participation in an event. So I'm going to just bring that in relation to what we're talking about today. I'm going to steal Councillor Wilson's favorite saying, quick, nimble, and agile. Pay system has to be quick, nimble, and agile as well. We create our budgets and our plans at the beginning of the year. Things change. Things changed this year. I all of a sudden became a member of the Chamber of Commerce for the town, which required me to go to the Alberta Chamber of Commerce event, which was outside of my detailed plan in my budget. So you're right, I got to use the unaccounted for funds for that. But in my review of many of the communities that were in today's presentation and my research separately, every single one of the communities that has a salary-based pay system has supporting other documents with regards to how council gets paid. So when we look at, say, the Mountain View County, which has a base pay salary system, it also has an expense rules that are very different than what we look at today as expenses. When we look at Lacombe, Lacombe has 4 other pieces of legislation and policy related to how councillors get paid, other than their base salary pay model. And that's to account for all of the concerns I've heard here today. What if you're doing this above everybody else? What if you're doing that differently than everybody else? What if you have to go to this or go do that? Well, that's where the expense accounts come in. And those are our budgets. So Lacombe, for instance, has the councillors' travel and sustenance budget, but they also have a training and conferences budget, which accounts for pretty much everything that we count as per diems. And they get paid differently outside their base salaries for those things. Their base salaries is just our honorarium with a few more things thrown into it that are inclusive into that pay model, like our regular policy committees or this committee meeting that we're at today or similar things like that. So long as there's the other supporting documents and the way we deal with our budgeting, the way we deal with our travel and subsistence and our training and conferences, our personal development, our educational stuff like that, that we already look at through the per diem process and our annual budget, which I can't see as just going away. All of us, we're not going to include, like this year, for instance, we had an opportunity to go to FCM. Last year, we didn't have an opportunity to go to FCM, so it has to be that quick, nimble, and agile, and that's the other supporting documents and other supporting legislation that comes along with a shift in this policy. So if this does come to council, I would anticipate seeing not just this policy changed, but also the policies in relation to how we create our budgets every year change, and the way those budgeting expenses and expense reporting changes to all become a complete package of council remuneration like it has in the examples that the administration provided us here with the 5 communities in our comparator list that do this. It's not just the change of one policy, it's the addition of several other groups of policies which create an entire remuneration package. So I'm sure if we do ask council or administration to bring this back, it will be brought back as a complete package covering all of the questions that were raised today about the what-ifs and what-offs. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. Sarah Williams?
Thank you again, Deputy Mayor. And I'll just comment because Councillor Cummings made a good point that this change would upend the current 106C policy. And I think just to use the example of council budgets, right now you do a very prescriptive budget for your honorarium, well, your your per diems, your training, your mileage, and what have you. For example, if you look at the administration's budgets for those same things, ours are grouped by department or divisions, essentially, and it's the law of averages, because budgets are a best guess at a certain place in time, and the more you try to be prescriptive, the more room for inflexibility and breaching the original plan is. So should this come forward, absolutely. That's why I think January 1st would be the quickest timeline we could implement something like this, because we would have to basically rework Policy 106C and how council budgets for whether it be professional development or for travel or anything else of that nature. But it would mimic what we already do at the administration level, where we monitor our budgets, and it's obviously the mayor would have a role in that. But yeah, that's about all.
Thank you for that. I would just like to comment that I agree with Wilson's comments as far as the structure and why we would do something like this. I feel that the other thing that it would do is it would put transparency into the light of what a councillor is actually getting compensated for. In that, sitting on the Compensation Review Board a few years back, that this was one of our concerns and one of our points that we brought up with council of the day, to ensure that transparency is upheld in the compensation of a councillor as well. The other thing that I feel would be a benefit to this, and it's actually listed in our briefing notes here, is the self-policing and the actual distribution of committee work and commission work as well. That I think this would even out and give us all a level playing field for our workloads going forward as a councillor. When we talk about recruiting a new councillor, recruit or elect, you know, what is the workload of a councillor? What is the expectations of a person in the role of a councillor or a mayor? And at this point right now, I feel it's quite vague. And so this would, I think, would draw some lines and put some guardrails on what that position would hold. So that's my comments on this. So I open the floor for any further comments. Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. I do think that it's transparent right now because it's on the website. So what can you be transparent on it, on how much money we are making and being compensated for? But regardless of that, my last concern, and this is just just me speaking, of course, but I think that when we talk about the salary, it kind of circumvents the work that was already just done by the Remuneration Committee. Because we never asked the Remuneration Committee to even look at salary. And they've done all that work to talk about our honorariums, our per diems, all this stuff that it seems like this kind of circumvents all that work that was done by them. And when we talk about Policy 106C, it would certainly take away a lot of the correction that we would need to do with that policy, because the policy talks about honorariums, per diems, and what they all cover. So it kind of seems to me like we're putting the genie back in the box or something. I don't know, but it just seems some backwards way of what we've done. I think we may have should have had the committee look at this salary possibility. And I appreciate the comments from Councillor Cummings with regards to, what was that community, Councillor Cummings, you had mentioned?
Lacombe.
Yeah, thank you. The Column, there are other communities that do salary model that we can use as an example of how we can go forward with this if we actually do want to do that. That might be a little bit more fair than rather than to try to lump everything together into one salary.
Mayor Dahl?
Did our CEO want to speak? I would just like to ask if I could confirm with you, through you, to our legislative clerk, if that is in fact the way it was with our remuneration committee. Okay, thank you.
With the Remuneration Committee, because the notice of motion came forward around the same time the committee was being appointed, and we deliberately left this question off asking them. But even though policy 106C speaks to things like per diems and honorariums, and that would have to be amended, the current policy on council remuneration does not speak to how council gets paid. It's only what it gets paid. So the committee's work, even most recently, would still be of value for the next term, because what we're trying to get from the committee is assessing where council should be, how much it should be paid. And I would argue in that it doesn't matter if you get paid through salary model or a per diem model. It's more, their work is more with the total amount and ensuring there's transparency in the total financial compensation at the end of the day. So just some clarity's sake on those points.
And may I get clarification on the numbers that are on the website for compensation for councillors and mayor, that it does not include the commission rates in there as well?
No, it does not.
Are they in the other websites as far as the commission's websites? Okay. No?
Sorry, Mountain View Seniors Housing posts all the commission.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Chairman. So I have just one overall concern with this switch that I'm sure we'll address somehow. When we look at the makeup of our council, we see mostly retired individuals with the time available. When we look at other councils, or I'll say the majority of other councils, are for towns and communities our size, there are full-time working individuals on those councils. And when we look at our availability to do work versus a full-time employed individual's ability to do work for the town, that's where you're going to see some changes. We don't see that change here, because those of us who do work have incredible flexibility for our schedules, and we're able to pull as much time as we can into council. It had been mentioned here before about attracting council members who have that varying schedule. When you do something like this and you say this is this, and then this base salary is for everybody, and this is the amount of work expected of everyone all the time, it does create a barrier in my mind to bringing on people who are younger and working full time. So that's my only real concern. I'm sure there's going to be a solution presented somewhere along the line. I don't see one myself, but I'm very limited in my experience and knowledge on the way councils work over time. And I've never worked on a council where we've had any more than one full-time working employee retired shortly thereafter. So I don't know how that works. Maybe some of the council members who have been on council for a lot longer than me can share some anecdotal stories about how that workload spread around when there were full-time employed individuals on council.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. Councillor Walsh?
I can share some of what the past is like. First council I sat on, there was 4 full-time employees who were not always able to attend events, not always able to attend even some council activities. And the other councillors on would fill in. Like, we had employees that would take days off just to attend, a council orientation. And days off meant that their employee gives them days off, but they lost on the other end. They couldn't take holidays. So that was an issue. And some just couldn't take days off. So, yeah, other councillors stepped up, filled in where they could. And I agree with Councillor Cummings. That's the danger. I mean, you make it so that people actually have full-time jobs, or other, it becomes problematic. Receiving the same salary, and council may have to self-police. You can see issues arising, arguments around the table that, hey, you're not stepping up and doing or not. So those are things that need to be taken into consideration when you're moving to a salary model.
Mayor Dahl?
Sorry, just one last comment, and then I'll just leave it to you, Mr. Chair. So have we ever reached out, not in my time that I'm aware of, have we ever reached out to ask this question to our citizens? They're the ones that are our hope for our future as elected officials. just to see how they feel and what they're looking for. That's just my comment.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Any further comments?
Yeah, just, again, I can't reiterate, it's good conversation, good discussion around the table, but I do appreciate the challenge that our council, this town faces, given that we are part-time elected officials. But I think to be fair to those folks that may consider running at some point in time, clarity around means and what that obligation entails. This table, we can all vote whether we're many-term councilors or first-term council. The business of municipal politics is becoming more and more complex and complicated, and requires more time and understanding as much as we can give them about what part-time and the obligation required to meet, I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any further? So we look at the page 30. Which do we like to go with this? And I need a motion of one way or the other. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. And as I would certainly make the motion as it say, let's bring the that we do have one council. I'm not sure if that means then this probably the end of August. We're all back together. Do a vote once and for all on whether to adopt status quo.
Thanks, Deputy. So I guess if Councillor Willis making that motion, probably just read that the committee to topic to a regular council meeting. And if it's defeated, then obviously it won't happen.
Thank you for summing that up. I was Councillor Wilson.
Motion that this committee accept this model presentation information and direction for its administration.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much. It's a tough discussion, but it's a good discussion, and I thank everybody for their input. It's really good. All right, so we're on to item 4B, procurement policies review. CAO Williams.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. Sheena's going to lead us through this one. Just a housekeeping note that Policy 218C, which exists right now, was included as a hyperlink, but we did forget to attach the updated policy when the package went out. So Sheena will spend perhaps just a bit more time going through the amended policy to see what we're proposing. And then there are a couple new policies in there as well. And to speak just to the entire purpose of this, I think certainly once during a council term, it's very prudent for council to understand how we spend your $40 million. And that's what this attempts to do. Obviously, we're a little lax on some of the policy side, but nothing too serious, mainly around disposition of assets, which is now a new policy, and disposition of land. So, again, this has taken several months. We've gone back and forth with legal, a lot of internal discussion. We're not changing a lot. We're just trying to make it a bit more explicit to ourselves and to council through policy. And then when we have to, be able to explain things to the general public or to contractors or other interested parties on how exactly we do buy goods and services here. So, Sheena, I'll turn it over to you, and you can take it away.
Thank you. So as CEO said, there's 4 policies today to go through. We'll start with the procurement policy. As was mentioned, this is a complete rewrite. There was nothing left in this one from the previous policy. It's been updated to reflect our current practices in purchasing and most importantly, to bring clarity around our processes. So the changes I will highlight are the things that have been included in this policy that were not in the previous one is section 3.1 here, where it shows what the policy does not apply to. So that just adds more clarity around our purchasing processes. The next section would be around sole sourcing. That is in section 4.4. Again, just bringing clarity around when we cannot use sole sourcing instead of the tables as below. So again, these tables are new, 4.5 and 4.6. Our previous policy did not follow trade agreement thresholds. We were lower, so we were within the agreements, but we were lower. So we were going out to bid on things that we didn't need to necessarily. So just bringing that efficiency in and following exactly what the trade agreements say. And so I will open it up to any questions from there.
Thank you for that introduction, Director Linderman. Any questions or comments from council? Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. Can we just scroll down to the numbers or the dollar figures, Legislative Clerk? Yeah, and just the next page down. So I just was wondering about the procurement threshold. It seems a little odd, the spread between the 10,000 and 199,000. Just wondering if that shouldn't be like anything after 100,000 you should be getting full competition. Is there a reason why it just seems like such a huge spread? You know, $10,000 is not a big significant amount when you take a look at our budget of a $30 million budget, but $100,000 or $200,000 would be. So could you just speak to that, please, Director Lynn?
For sure. So again, this is just for construction, those values, and that is just purely following the New West Partnership Trade Agreement. So they say you do not have to do a competitive process for anything under 200,000.
Much for the clarification. It just seemed like a lot of spread and it's tweaked in my brain. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. So again, just to clarify my understanding, so when I see direct purchase, whether it be for construction or for goods and services, and I'm looking at the, obviously less than 10,000 there. So we do have cards or pro cards or credit cards, right, that people can use. So would that basically cover, pending the limit and everything, the people would be able to engage through their credit card to make some of these purchases, whether it be for the goods and services or for the construction? And my other question is, do we have like an actual delegation of financial authority in place, you know, that says from Brent to the director, or sorry, from the CEO to the directors, and then from the directors to IC and so on?
Yes, so that will be is in the procedure. Previously, it was in the policy, but we've removed it from council policy and put it in the procedure. And then your first question, yes, we do have purchasing cards. Most of them they're all in the non-competitive limit lines. So yeah, they can all purchase within there.
Good, thank you for that. Any other questions, comments? I have one that might be a little bit out of topic for this policy, but I have a question. Are we a member of any purchasing group, like within the municipalities?
Yeah, so we are with both AB Munis and the RMA. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments, or? Mayor Dahl?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Chair. At this time, then, I would ask that the information as presented and request the presented procurement policies be brought to a future council meeting for oh, sorry.
We have more policies.
Oh, I thought you were giving me permission for that. Thank you.
My mistake. Sorry about that, Mayor Doll.
Sorry, that was probably,
Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, sorry. A couple of years ago, at one of our Alberta municipality conventions, I did have an opportunity to meet with one of the construction groups in Alberta. We had a big discussion about the Western, you gave the name for it, but I forgot. Right, and competitiveness will buy local. And it was a big concern that they had about the buy local program being pretty much illegal in relation to that trade agreement as well as the free trade agreement that we have within our borders. But I do notice here in the table 2, in 4.6, paragraph 1.6, that it's only for dollar amounts above $200,000, where I'm assuming that's where it becomes illegal to buy local as a policy, rather than do the full national procurement process. One of the bigger concerns they had, and I'm sure we're seeing it here, I just want to clarify that we are seeing it, and it's not just a phenomenon that they're seeing that we're not seeing, that the availability of local contractors is probably a bigger concern with local procurement than anything else, and that we may not have, I know we have a couple of concrete companies in Olds, but I don't believe we have a major construction company in Olds that can or would be willing to do the projects. I think you've mentioned that in the past. Is that a bigger concern here when we're talking about that middle range dollar amounts for availability and competitiveness?
CAO Williams?
Yes. The availability and the dwindling availability of contractors of all construction varieties and construction service industries is our biggest challenge, I would say. And not just from a treating or being more locally preferenced, it really is driving costs up as well. That just like you see in the telecommunications industry or the grocery industry, there's very few players getting bigger or lessening players but bigger, and that's what we see in asphalt, concrete, construction builds, all of that. So most definitely. And to your point about the local pieces into the policy, you're correct. Once it reaches that $200,000 threshold that is under the NWPTA, we are unable to give local preference. There is more flexibility at council's discretion under $200,000 for construction, $75,000 for services, and that's where we can. But that's where we also have to make sure we still are getting the best deal for taxpayers. And local does not always mean the best deal, and it is a delicate balance for sure, because you're not going to make everyone happy all the time.
Supplemental?
You bet. So as a business owner and a member of the Chamber of Commerce and the Uptown Olds Association in the past, one of the biggest comments I've heard from other business owners is you guys got to support local. Why are you buying these or hiring these contractors out there? And I've tried to explain to them the legalities of doing that. I like the comment that you made there. Sometimes local is actually not the best option. We are still stewards of our taxpayer dollars, and we have to be that, even if it means turning down a local contractor for a more competitive non-local contractor. It may not be the most appetizing thought to some of our local contractors, but it is a financial reality, and I just wanted to put that out there. Thanks.
Thank you for those comments. Director Lindeman, would you like to carry on?
thank you. So I think the next one is disposal of land in the list. This one is a brand-new policy and fairly straightforward, as it is completely legislated in the MGA. So this policy is essentially just outlining the legislation that is to be followed.
Well, that one was easy, eh? Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. I do have a question for Director Lindeman, and I just want for clarification. When I was looking up the sections for the divisions of land and disposal of reserve land, I couldn't find anywhere where it said that disposal of land that is municipally owned lands still needs to have, the decision needs to rest with council. And I'm wondering if that is clear in the MGA. I was trying to find it when I was reading the council package, and I wasn't able to, but when I looked upline and researched other communities that have this policy, they have it in their policy. So I'm wondering if we had found that in the MJA, or I'm just sort of looking for clarification on that. No, they didn't reference it. It was in their policy.
CAO Williams?
So to the MGA part, thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. To the MGA part, to Councillor Ryan's question, it doesn't speak to authority, and you're right, different municipalities do it in different ways. It really is concerned about the advertising. If the land's being disposed of at below market value, then if that criteria is met, it is open to council's policy directive. For us, we haven't sold much land or property recently. Generally be done through the budget process, that if council is budgeting for a sale of land, that in itself is a policy directive to administration. But everything else would be taken on a case-by-case basis, that if we were to dispose of a asset or building, property, real property, generally, of course, it would come to council for at least debate. But given also the nature of property transactions, they are a lot more confidential in a lot of ways between a buyer and a seller. So we can't always debate it in open meetings and have that sale agreement ratified, because there's oftentimes letter of intents, there's oftentimes sale conditions that have to come off. So it is not a perfect system, but...
Supplemental?
Yes, thank you. So my concern would be, though, I understand the idea for confidentiality with the sale of land, but my concern would be that land that is municipal owned being sold by, say, the CEO, without the council even knowing that the land was sold by the CEO, without having a motion or a direction from the council to say, yes, go ahead and sell this piece of property. That's my concern, and that's what I was wondering, if that's in the MGA. If it's not in the MGA, how is council, or how are we protecting municipal land in case we had a rogue CAO that was going on their own? And not to say that you went CAO Williams, but I'm just saying at some point that this could happen if it's not in policy, and I've seen it written, because when I did my research, I saw it written, and other communities have that policy, saying the decision for a municipal sale needs to be made by council, or a direction. It didn't say you had to reveal any kind of information about the sale of land, but certainly the direction would have to come from council to say, yes, we see no reason to keep this piece of property, we have no use for it, so they direct the CEO to put it up for sales. See what I'm saying?
Thank you, Councillor Rock. CAO Williams?
Right. So, okay. So in that context, if council want to add that they are the authority for selling land, sure, we can do that. The details are such a case-by-case basis, it's hard to really get much more prescriptive than that. But going back to the potential rogue CAO scenario too, facilities generally are the only thing at risk here, and if we had a large amount of residential land, for example, which we are not developers the same way a lot of municipalities are, so if you look even towns to our south, they own a lot of tracts of land where it's a different kind of process. If you recall, council spoke in closed session about disposing of a very small piece of municipal reserve land to correct some, basically surveying errors from decades ago. That is in the MGA, that in Division 9, Part 17, that, for example, the council's, it's a statutory amendment essentially, that is in council's wheelhouse. So the rogue CAO scenario would only happen, I would say, to, it'd be hard to sell a facility to the council knowing, that, to be fair, that's out there, but residential lots if we were to have them. But if council feels more comfortable having that authority, I don't see the need, the issue putting it in there if it's...
So friendly amendment in the text then? Yeah, okay. Sheena? Director Lindeman?
Thank you. So the next policy we have is the disposal of assets. So this again is a brand new policy, and it would apply to all town-owned assets excluding land, engineered structures, and buildings. And again, it just provides a clear process to follow on the disposal of these assets. right now, as I said, we have nothing in place, so it's kind of just from thing to thing, what we do is different. So sometimes auction, sometimes bid, whatever. So this just defines a clear process on how that will be handled.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council? Yep, pretty straightforward. All right,
Right.
continue on.
And the next one is a fleet management policy. And again, a brand-new policy. This will provide the guidelines for the acquisition, maintenance, replacement, and sale of our fleet vehicles. This policy will apply to all light and medium-duty vehicles, excluding emergency services. It outlines a threshold for replacement of vehicles, as well as establishing and maintaining a reserve fund for the future purchase of vehicles. Attached to the policy was a draft capital plan, and if you look at that list, you can see that there will be a significant transition period as we align our current fleet with the policy. The highlighted vehicles there, as you can see, should, according to this policy, have been replaced by now. So as we transition, it will take a little while to build up that reserve to a point where we're at that place where we can fund all new vehicles through that reserve.
Thank you. CAO Williams?
Thanks again, Deputy Mayor. And just one thing I didn't add to the list, how we arrived at 10 years. If you recall last year, maybe a bit longer, we got a presentation from Enterprise Fleet Management about their system. Enterprise is the largest car purchaser and owner in the world, and they have done a lot of work on cost of ownership, and that's where that 10-year timeline comes into play. That vehicles that have, the emissions technology, the electronics built in, all of that, which all new vehicles do, 10 years seem to be the time when they start to cost the most money. Obviously, Enterprise's model was based on a kind of a 24-month rotating kind of lease option, which we couldn't quite afford. We could always approach it at a different time, though, but for now, that's where the 10 years came from, as opposed to 8 or 12 years, in case council was curious.
Thank you for that information. Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Chair. I've been waiting for this one since I joined council. This is a great one. I remember our very first budget discussion, we were debating on whether replacing one of those highlighted vehicles, and that was an incredibly long debate over what I thought was a really silly thing to be debating about. I know we have to be fiscally responsible. When we create an asset for the town owner to own, we have to create a plan for managing that asset throughout its life cycle and its replacement. And this is a great first step into that way. Building up those reserves is absolutely fundamental to good fiscal responsibility for a municipality. I think this is a tremendous step forward, and I applaud the administration for presenting it to us today, and I'm wholly in favor of it. Thank you.
Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley, through you to our CEO. So, yeah, based on that, the 10 years then, is that how we also base the kilometers then as well? CEO Williams, 150,000 seems low for 10 but is that only because they're just running around in town and so they don't generate a lot of kilometers anyway?
Right. That number was as well kind of taking from Enterprise, but we'll never put on 150,000 kilometers, I reckon. So 10 years is gonna. That's why we use the 10-year arithmetic here. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, and through you to the CEOs. Just, I know we haven't yet gotten to budget discussions on the verge. Just wondering though, if we were to implement an in-house maintenance repair program, would that change the 10-year numeric at all, in your opinion, or can't say? Who knows?
See, I knew you were going to ask this question, and that's why I have an answer ready. It's not because I'm really smart. It's just because I know you so well. I would say yes, it would help currently, but we're so far behind, it'll only catch us up. My hope is that having an in-house mechanic will lessen our current fleet costs, that we can then invest into the $183,000 annual reserve transfer we currently transfer $0 for. So Because again, this is ideal what we want to get to. And like you saw in service level the other day, we had the municipal enforcement capital plan. Sheena has one for fire apparatus and one for IT that we'll bring forward to council soon enough. And we want to do other things for parks equipment for heavy fleet. Just to give council an idea of, in an ideal world, this is how much money we should be putting away. And having that in policy is great, but obviously policy has flexibility based on your financial needs. But anyways, to your point, a mechanic will, yes, help us extend the life, but we also want to make sure we're getting decent resale value as well. And I think it will all balance out. We don't want to be selling things with no brakes, half a transmission, and a back window that's out either. So that when we do sell it 10 years, we do get some return on it to then reinvest. But hopefully, I'm confident with the mechanic function, we will have annual savings to reinvest. So. But that's a conversation for another day.
I would just like to comment that I thank CEO Williams for mentioning the shiny green and yellow stuff. I was wondering where that all fit in these plans, so stay tuned, I guess, eh? Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. My other question was, and I agree with Councillor Cummings with regards to seeing a fleet policy. It's quite nice to be able to have one. But we've got a money for transfer to reserve at 183, and I know that given our financial constraints there, that's going to be a bit of a problem. Is it our intention to try to hit that target every single year, or are we going to work up to that?
CEO Williams.
Yes, so that's why if I scroll quickly, there is what I would consider a really well-written, brilliant clause, and I say that because I put it in there, that following the approval of this policy, there will be a transition period to phase in the costs of bringing the current fleet in. That transition phase may last a decade, but that isn't the intention. We will eventually put that amount of money away, but it will take us a while to get there for sure. So.
Thank you for that information. And I have to apologize, I didn't mean to leave out the fire apparatus, which is shiny red and chrome. Sorry about that, Director Andrew. All right. Any further presentations? Okay. Mayor Dahl?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I move that we accept the information as presented and request the presented procurement policies be brought to a future council meeting for final approval.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, for that. Call for the vote. All those in favor? All right, passed. Thank you very much. I'm not used to this one. Sorry, Marcy. Moving on to 4C, OCAO policy review. CAO Williams.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Again, this policy was reviewed and forgotten about. When we did rescind the Destination Olds Collective Fund, this should have came forward at the time because that was the primary funder and driver of this policy. But now that we have our NGEI initiative and the EDAC committee working towards the overall economic development strategy, tourism will be part of that. So given that the current 1001C is so specific around a tourism strategy and devoting resources to that, I do believe it conflicts with the current EDAC prerogative and what we're accomplishing elsewhere. So I believe rescindment is in order for this policy.
Thank you, CAO. Any questions, comments? No? Good. May I have a motion? Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I'd make the motion that council accept the administrative recommendation and request the policy for repeal be brought to a future council meeting for final approval. Marcy, you're testing my eyes there.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wilson. Call for the vote. All those in favor? Thank you very much. That was passed. All right. Moving down to item 4D, Infrastructure Policy Review. Turn it over to CAO Williams for introduction.
Thank you again. I'm going to pass this one off to Director Pedro.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. This one's a fairly straightforward policy. As council will note, there are no substantial changes. This is just an update to the previous winter road maintenance policy. We did have a review of the policy in conjunction with the procedure renewal that took place this year. And so we just needed to update to the new standard and some minor wordsmithing to make it sound slightly more coherent than the previous policy. And yeah, I'd happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Pedro. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, you're getting off quite easy, Director Pedro. Can I call for a motion, please? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I make the motion that accept as presented with no material changes recommended in request policy 502C, winter road maintenance, be brought to a future council meeting for final approval.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Call for the vote. All those in favor? Pass. Thank you very much. Takes us down to 4E, Community Services Policy Review. CAO Williams for introduction.
Thank you again, and this one goes over to Director O'Brien.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. This is just really wordsmithing changes here. The intent of the policy remains the same. The title of the policy has been changed, and just an understanding that facility booking refers to trails, parks, recreation facilities, and sports fields.
Thank you, Director O'Brien. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I ask for the vote. All those in favor? Oh, we need a motion. Sorry. Getting ahead of myself. Marcy's eyes went up there. Okay, Councillor Ryan.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. I move that we accept as presented with no material changes recommended and policy, request policy 901C, facility booking, be brought to a future council meeting for final approval.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Call for the vote. All those in favor? Pass. Thank you very much. 4F, RCMP 5-year forecast. Again, to CAO Williams for introduction.
Well, this is good news, so I'll let Sheena take this one.
As always. So this is being brought forward to council today just as information, as is outlined in the information provided. The RCMP are currently forecasting an $800,000 increase in our annual budget over the next 5 years, going from $2.1 million in 2024 to just over $2.9 million in 2029. This forecast does include the assumption of 2 additional officers, which is something that council will need to consider over the next few years.
Thank you, Director Lindeman. Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick questions on the forecast here. So we have seen in the news recently that they are entering or currently in negotiations for yet again another contract with the RCMP because their current contracts actually end this year. And then, of course, when that contract is ratified, it will be after that contract expires, and they'll be doing yet again another contract. So 2 new contract referrals within this time frame that we see here today. The first part of my question is, have we taken into consideration an estimate or an expectation of an increase in the salaries of our RCMP officers because of those contract negotiations? And the other one, I know that there's a certain population level in which our police funding model changes, and I'm not sure if that was 10,000 or 15,000. If you could remind me as to which one of those 2 thresholds have to be met before we take on 100% of the policing costs.
So I'll answer the first question. The forecast is provided by the RCMP, and I believe it only takes into consideration their current contract. It doesn't take into account anything that's going to happen in the future. And I will pass to CAO. I believe it's 15,000 when the
Yeah, the
bylaw
next
changes.
threshold's 15,000, where it switches from 70/30 to 90/10, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Supplemental?
Yeah, is there any expectation or plan, I guess, to, as we did in the last negotiations when they first became unionized, we had started putting away money so that the massive increase we saw upon that first contract wasn't such a big burden to the town of Olds as it was to many other communities that hadn't been saving. Do we have a contingency fund that we're putting aside for anticipated increases in their contract that's due next year, or anticipated to be completed for next year, retroactive to this year, as we did last time?
Thank you. Director Linderman?
Yeah, you will see that in budget. We'll bring something forward in alignment with this forecast.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley, and through you to the Director Linderman. Just, have we seen this type of document before, this type of forecast before? And perhaps we have, and I've just missed it, which is entirely possible, but, and I just, like $800,000 over 5 years, 1.1 million, give or take, before the split of the 70-30 split. Like, I know you referenced 2 additional officers. I guess at the appropriate time, we will get further details around what's driving the total increase. But I like the forecast, and I certainly appreciate the role that the RCMP provide as far as law enforcement and the difficult role they have. But like everything else, like this is one more bitter pill for the town to have to swallow. So is this a new forecast, or has this been something that's been come before and I've just missed it?
It has been given to administration before. This is the first time it has come to council.
Thank you. Director Andrew?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. And just to further Councillor Wilson's question regarding the increased cost. So yes, the increased cost of 2 officers is a fairly substantial amount of the increase in that number, but also they are including the increased costs that we've been informed of previously of the new equipment. So the replacement of their service pistols, tasers, body armor, and all of those kind of ancillary equipment. So they are trying to make an inclusive statement or estimation of the cost of replacing all of that gear. And of course, there is that perception or the reality that we're going to see increased costs for more staff with new contracts or whatever going forward.
Thank you for that additional information. Any further comments, questions? None? I call for the motion. Harvey? Sorry, Councillor Walsh?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I move that we accept for information the RCMP 5-year forecast update.
Thank you. All in favor? That is passed. Thank you very much. Move on to 4G, bylaw 2024-33 fire bylaw. Sao Williams for introduction.
Thank you again. And this one will also go to Sheena. I'm joking. It's Director Andrews with us today.
You're messing with the mind of somebody that had limited sleep last night from fireworks and emergency calls, so, yeah. Thank you. What's presented here is an update to the existing fire bylaw, which was last revised in 2018. As far as the substantial changes, the majority of the bylaw remains unchanged. The key areas that we wanted to address, to bring up, was Article 1 was the addition of lock boxes. So this was previously something that was contained within the Alberta Fire Code, and the movement in the Fire Code is to remove this wording, and the reason is that they're allowing municipalities to essentially put provisions in their own municipal bylaws about what this looks like, so they've opted to remove it completely. So what we've essentially done is taken the language that's in the current fire code and we've applied it to a municipal bylaw so that we can have it going forward. So this isn't any change, this just changes the legislative branch that it follows. So right now we have authority under the Safety Codes Act to enforce this, where now we'll just transition that over to our municipal bylaw. So no change to the service level or effect for the citizens, it's just continuing on legislation that's already been in place. Second one, around public fire hydrants. Again, the one thing, this one's always been a bit of a bone of contention, because when you talk about fire hydrants, everybody wants to look in the fire bylaw, but it could be under the water bylaw or it could be under community standards. So we're just trying to standardize it, and we've added the points in the fire bylaw surrounding essentially citizens' obligations to keep the fire hydrants clear and accessible for use. Some of the biggest issues that we have of fire hydrants in the community are overgrown vegetation surrounding the fire hydrant and or snow accumulation. So just it's a standardized piece just for us to find it somewhat easily when somebody types in the search engine fire hydrant. The first word is fire, so hopefully it'll take it to the fire bylaws. So again, it's not new legislation. It would be just a reshuffle of putting it somewhere a little bit more logical to fit. The last, number 3, talking about fire hazard, and this is again somewhat clarity of wording, where as the fire department we have the ability, if we recognize that through unsafe condition where the storage of combustible materials is stored in a manner where it might have a risk to adjacent properties or people, then we have the ability within the bylaw to take immediate action to rectify. So an example would be is if somebody was, building a new garage and they stack their entire lumber pile up against the fence that's only 2 feet away from the neighboring house. In such a manner, we could say that's an undue fire hazard, and it could, if it caught fire, it could spread to a neighboring property and have severe effects, so we can take action to remedy that quickly. So that gives us the tool in our toolbox if we need to make sure that everybody's property is safe as possible. The addition of Part 18, so recovery of costs. So this is one that is somewhat new. Although the previous fire bylaw always gave us provision to be able to recover costs for providing fire service, it was somewhat vague. And as of late, the biggest thing for us is that, getting out of traditional habits or traditional practice that was never necessarily clearly articulated and followed with a sound policy. What we've proposed within this is that there is a cost recovery scale that, based on council feedback, was affordable and reasonable. So the big thing that I want to emphasize in this recovery cost model is that this isn't money that's going to be put into buying new fire trucks, because citizens with their taxes do pay towards the replacement and the basic provision of service. But what the general taxation model doesn't present is the operational costs. So that's the hourly wages of firefighters and the ancillary costs such as fuel and equipment that we utilize specific to responding to emergency incidents. And this is the issue that we face, is that the costs through inflationary pressures over the last few years has risen to a level where, it is getting substantially harder for us to maintain the level of service that we have with fire. And so if we can alleviate some of the pressures through the user fee model, so instead of having a generalized tax increase to pay higher taxes for everybody to cover the cost of the fire department, most of these costs can be applied through people with personal insurance. So if you have a large dollar loss fire, you typically are making insurance claim anyway. And so part of that is that user pay model, that it helps keep the cost for everybody lower as opposed to everybody covering and never using the service. So that's what we're proposing. Obviously, looking for feedback from council on how that will work and what your views are. And finally, the addition of the offenses and enforcement. So this again is the realignment of our other bylaws, is that we're putting in standardized penalty grids so that any contradiction or contravention of any of the bylaws have a standard approach and penalty outlined, and a little easier for our enforcement to follow up to gain compliance. So it's essentially housekeeping of bylaws, which we've been doing a lot of. So with that, unless there's questions, that's what I will stop with.
Thank you, Director Andrew. I'll go to Councillor Cummings and then Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. So I do have a couple of quick questions, and pardon my ignorance when it comes to firefighting in Alberta. I was a firefighter in other provinces, so the rules are going to be significantly different, I think. What enforcement capability does the Alberta legislation allow for firefighters within these scopes? Like, I know we have a fire inspector. I know their role. I'm sure we have fire investigators that investigate arson and criminal activities like that. But do we have a fire marshal? Someone who's capable of enforcing bylaws and rules and regulations associated like this. And I'm just going to talk specifically about the fire hydrant being overgrown with plants. Does Alberta allow our fire department and our firefighting personnel to enforce those types of rules?
Yes, thanks for the question. And so, yes, through the provision of a fire bylaw such as this document, essentially what council is doing is they are enabling or appointing myself as the fire chief, and you'll see the language throughout the document where it says the fire chief or designate would be responsible for making these determinations. And so how it works is through us enacting a municipal bylaw, then any of the provisions within this fire bylaw, if I as the fire chief deem it appropriate and necessary to take action or consider it a hazard, then that gives us the opportunity through our own municipal bylaw process to enact that, and it goes hand in hand with the Municipal Government Act. So essentially we're working within that prerogative. So anytime that we're taking action on a personal piece of property, it's that link to the MGA that allows us to do so. And so it is a bit convoluted, and I can appreciate that it would be a little bit unclear to the average person, because the overarching legislation that gives us the majority of our powers when it comes to public safety is the Alberta Safety Codes Act. And so, again, as a fire inspector that we have, and myself is included in that through designation and training, we can go down that route if we see it as a public safety hazard. And we are supplemented through the court system on that one to enact that. Or if it's the lower grade where, like, say, we talk about property offenses such as like the storing of undue fire hazard, then it's a little easier for us to manage through a municipal bylaw. Does that give you the answer you were looking for?
Supplemental?
Yeah, so in your opinion then, as the director of public safety, emergency services, sorry, when it comes to bylaws or a bylaw like this, would you see yourself or someone in your department enforcing these regulations or calling upon our already stretched out municipal enforcement officers to do that for you?
Yeah, so again, there are different models throughout Alberta where there's, in some municipalities, the fire chief and or senior fire officers can be sworn as bylaw officers for the municipality. So they can do that simply through an act of the CAO. And there are certain provisions that you could be responsible for enforcing. So an example would be parking in a fire zone. So if somebody's parked a vehicle in front of a fire hydrant or a fire department connection on a building, you could issue a bylaw ticket right then and there as a sworn bylaw officer. So that is a potential for sure. The other piece is that if we record information, so if I witnessed an act, even though we didn't take action on it immediately, then we can pass it to our municipal enforcement officers, or we can actually have the RCMP enforce it for us as well, that we could have them issue a ticket or, tow a vehicle, if you will, if it was deemed urgent.
Thank you, Director Andrew. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Daley. Just on page 66, part 16, 98, number 3, should there be a not before the shall not permit anything to obstruct?
Yeah, we will check that one. That could definitely be a omitted not, so we will take that for future revision. Thank you.
I would think we wouldn't want people to obstruct the fire hydrants, which is what you just said. And I do have one quick question with regards to the, where was it? The charges. Which section was that again? was 18, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, 18, under 18. I did, just to speak to your thing with regards, your comments with regards to insurance, I did check my insurance just to see, and it does have it rated in my policy that fire department charges from fire department is covered in the insurance. So I just thought maybe we should make sure that we put that out there to people to, double check their insurance policies to see, because it must be a common place for other municipalities to do this, if it's already in a policy, blanket policy. So it might be something that we could put out there, information-wise.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and along those same lines, yeah, I think it's page 67, part 18, sections, 104 and 105. So this whole thing of cost recovery, and through you to the director, certainly was a bit of a hot-button topic, a month or two ago, when there was an incident in town, a residential fire. So, if I may, I do have a couple questions, but the first one, do we know relative to the fire protection service part? Because I know we also talk about responding to MVAs and highway incidents, but relative to the fire protection part, do we have a quantification of what that cost is on an annual basis? Because I know I did a bit of reading in my part-time role and research, and there's a variety of counties and municipalities that do a variety of things, right? Either you can do a fire tax to try and recover the costs, or you can simply charge out. So do we know what that kind of cost is isolated to fire protection service?
Okay, so I'll try to answer your question as thoroughly as I can. I don't know that, I don't have a direct answer for your question. I can't pull that number out because, no, I don't have it. So first, I would just want to step back 1 second to Councillor Ryan's comment. So communication of the charges and rates, and as far as insurance, we do have a communication that is ready to launch. In fact, our intent is to launch it today, that we'd like to put it out, because obviously we wanted to float this to council first, and we wanted to make sure that it was received well. And then part of this is the education process that we want to inform the public, and so we do have that ready to roll, and it will go out accordingly. Because you're right, it's contained in a majority of people's insurances, and they do have that coverage. It's when in those rare cases where it's not covered that is the big headache for sure. The second piece, Councillor Wilson, so your comment about a previous situation that we've had locally, and it is a difficult position that we are in as a fire department and a municipality. So one, we will never withhold service to anybody due to their ability or inability to pay. That's not how this works. We provide service, and after the fact is, we figure out administratively, and then we want to make sure that that's clear to everybody, because we would never say, well, we take cash or credit, would you like to choose one now before we respond? That's not part of the deal. Anyway, the big thing is that unfortunately we do deal with situations quite frequently where we'll respond to a fire, and the particular area of concern is where we have tenants. So quite often landlords will have insurance for their structure, but tenants will not have insurance for their contents. So a house could be burnt down and all things lost, and the tenants have no insurance, no coverage whatsoever, but the building can be rebuilt. But that insurance isn't extended to the people occupying the structure. So that is a very common occurrence, and unfortunately there's no mandate to have insurance, and that's a tenant-landlord relationship that you have to have. Is some tenants or some landlords will require a tenant to have insurance to rent from them, which is completely their own business, but we'll make sure that we communicate that as well. And the other issue is that, the practice of billing for fire service is a common practice across Alberta, and yes, there are very many models. Some municipalities choose to do the full cost recovery, so they'll charge a higher rate to everybody for every incident. What we were proposing in our rate recovery model is somewhat of a balanced approach. We understand that the majority of times our equipment is very expensive, and it takes a lot of money to operate a busy fire department. But if we were to pass that exact cost on to every citizen every time that we rolled out the door, if you burnt spaghetti on your stove and elicited a fire response, you would probably receive a bill that would be upwards of $2,000. And we all know that that wouldn't go over very well in a community like this, and I would hate to have to present a bill to somebody for that, and as much as you as councillors would hate to receive the concerns from citizens about receiving a bill. So that's why our approach was such that we really were trying to break down the cost of what is it costing us extra when your taxes pay for a fire truck, a fire hall, the training, the equipment to be ready for service. And now when we're summoned for service, what is that cost? And so that's what this model is based on, is we're trying to recover the cost of when, the staff wages, so the firefighters getting paid to go and put out your burnt spaghetti or ventilate your house because it's full of smoke, or something to that effect. And so we tried to really put a practical approach that was not going to be ridiculous. And I think that this will go a long way to easing the burden of the financial need and requirement going forward. Because if we manage it with our robust tax system that we have in place, we are adequately funded. There is no doubt the fire department is looked after. It's just that it's that growing need and demand on our time and our services is getting hard, especially with the increasing call volume. So that's kind of where we went with that number. So sorry to make this long-winded, but I'm trying to give you the good information. When we get summoned to a call and we're there for over an hour, that's typically when a large-scale incident happens. So your house is on fire, it's a big incident, a lot of things are at play. That is typically the trigger point where you are going to activate your insurance, right? Your house has got a major loss, there's been a lot of things. So the whole premise for us is to make sure that now at that point, we're talking a substantial loss of property, and so it's easier for us to transfer the real true cost of that operation to the property owner or the person involved. And so we're using the rates set out by Alberta Transportation that we bill for motor vehicle collisions, and that rate is much higher than the lower ancillary response fees that we're proposing. And so we think that that's probably the fair balance, because if you had a substantial loss, then you're now in a different ballpark, and this is the game where you would pay cover the true cost of that emergency, and hopefully again through insurance you're covered for that, so you don't see that. Whereas the smaller values, that's the kind of thing that you pay out of pocket and say, well, geez, I'm sure glad somebody came and helped me mop up a broken water main in my basement, and that kind of a public service. So hopefully that gave you a little more insight as to that number.
Thank you for that. Director Andrew? Any other comments? No? Okay, then I'll ask for, just under the gun.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And again, through you to the director, and I appreciate that response. And so obviously there's again, I'm trying to, hopefully I never have to go through this. So I'm trying to put myself in the position of a homeowner that has, as you said, a major event in their residence or their building. So there's obviously a dialogue that starts to occur at some point in terms of this cost recovery, the type of insurance coverage they have, because Councillor Ryan's indicated her policy provides coverage. I will be scurrying home to review my policy upon completion of this meeting, but, so there's obviously a dialogue that goes on, and so if somebody says, hey, I don't have, my policy doesn't have, like, they have a policy, but it doesn't cover that, so there's a give and take, is there, or?
So, yeah, so it's a really good question. So now I'm not an insurance industry expert, so I can't speak with 100% accuracy, but the firefighting expense is a general provision that is contained within most homeowners' insurance policies. So typically, it would be a surprise if it was not already contained, as opposed to something specifically you have to ask. Where you start to see the fluctuation in that consistency is in commercial policies. So that's the big one, is where commercial occupancies would have different standard conditions and articles within. So that'll be part of our communication to the community as well, to make sure that they know that and see. The big thing is again, as far as, who's insured and not insured, one premise that, we cannot follow is that, we can't come through to say, hey, do you have insurance? Yes? Okay, great. Well, here's your bill. How much insurance do you have? We're going to send this out. That doesn't happen. We have to follow a set rule and regulation. So when we're billing, we bill everybody. Now, the biggest premise as the municipality is there are different mechanisms available, obviously through the CAO, is that he can look at cases where, if financial hardship is a consideration on the payment of a bill for a service, then he has all sorts of tools at his disposal on how he deals with that, and, whether it's payment programs or, prolongation, all sorts of those kind of things. So, again, service will never be withheld based on the premise to pay or whether you're insured or not.
Thank you, Director Andrew. Supplemental?
Yes, well, just a very brief comment. So, and again, for our viewers that are watching and listening, so I think it's important and welcome the communication that's going to be forthcoming, but I think it's important that people realize we aren't unique in this as a municipality in terms of cost recovery. And if it doesn't do this mechanism, as I said, when you look at municipalities, they do it through a tax rate hike or a specific fire, what they call a fire tax. So, but we aren't unique as far as a cost recovery model. We're not blazing a trail here, so we're the town of Olds. So.
Thank you, Councillor. COO Williams?
Yeah, and just to have the final word, perhaps, this is the first municipality I worked in where we didn't have a robust cost recovery mechanism. It is a rider, basic rider on every insurance policy. The difference that you always run into is that vehicle insurance is a legislated requirement that you have basic liability on your vehicle before you drive it. Home insurance, after your mortgage is expired, even then they don't check it. But it's no by anyone. So people play the game. And as a taxpayer, we're getting in line with years. With the communication, again, with service will always be provided.
For the information, any further questions? I will.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. I move that we, as presented, or actually amended for the change, council through, or sorry, accept amended through the administrative officer. Is that clear? Made to council.
Okay. Sorry, legislative officer. All in favor? That motion is passed.